Hi, this is Ofori, the digital reader, and today I'm going to be talking about something that's really special to me, my favorite booktubers and e-reader related YouTube channels. These are the things that inspired me, not just to read more, but to actually start making this channel. When I first started thinking about doing YouTube, I asked myself, why would anyone want to listen to me talk about book stuff? But then I realized everybody has their own way of doing this. Some folks are polished, some are quirky, some are deep and analytical, and some just sit down and chat like they're hanging out with you in your living room. And that variety is what makes booktubers great. Each of the creators I'm going to talk about today gave me something special. Maybe it was their energy, maybe their honesty, their humor, or just the way they looked at books. I saw little pieces that stood out and it made me think, hey, maybe I could do this too, and maybe people would actually want to hear it. Now let's be real, when I first started exploring BookTube, most of the creators I stumbled on were young women under 30. And that makes sense because the reality is women are the majority of active readers, especially when it comes to fiction. But over the last few years, I've noticed something cool. More diversity is showing up. We're seeing more men, more older readers, more people from different backgrounds and walks of life. And that really encouraged me because I thought, okay, I'm not 25, I'm not trendy. But I do love books and I do love tech, and maybe that combination is something worth sharing. So today I'm going to break down the booktubers and book-related channels I follow in three categories: book reviews, tech, and then just a last wild card of comic book history, which is really only one channel, but I want to talk about it. And along the way, I'll share how they influenced me, what I got from them, and why I think you should check them out too. The very first booktuber I followed seriously was Kalila D. Now here's a little backstory. For a long time my reading diet was, let's call it, predictable. I was locked into superhero fiction and urban fantasy. I'm talking years of nothing but capes, superpowers, druids, Shadowrun, and magical detectives. Nothing wrong with that. I still love that stuff. But I wanted to break out. I wanted variety. So I started looking around on YouTube for someone who could give me recommendations outside my comfort zone, and that's when I found Kalila. What hooked me first was her wrap-up videos. She would go through all the books she read in a given month, and I just loved the variety. She had romance, historical fiction, thrillers, contemporary novels, nonfiction, just this wide buffet of reading. It was like walking into a bookstore and realizing there's a whole other section you've never looked at before. But it wasn't just books, it was her energy. She has this vibe that I can only describe as bookish animaniac. She's bubbly, fun, and just full of life. And as an older dude, I have to admit, watching her channel made me feel younger. It reminded me that reading can be fun, exciting, and a little silly, not just serious and academic. It wasn't about looks or presentation, it was about the way she clearly loved what she was doing, and that love was contagious. To put it in perspective, last year I'd say half the books I read outside of fantasy and sci-fi came directly from her recommendations. That's huge. She stretched my readings in ways I hadn't expected. She doesn't focus much on the hardcore fantasy or sci-fi I usually gravitate towards. When she does dip into those areas, it's often more romantasy, like Sarah J. Maas's Court of Thorn and Roses series. And while that's not usually my lane, it made me realize that genres blend more than I thought. Sometimes what looks like fantasy is really a romance at heart, and sometimes what looks like romance has strong fantasy bones. One thing I picked up from her is that when you follow a booktuber, you're not just following their tastes, you're expanding your own, and I just really enjoyed that. The next channel that I would recommend is Mike Travels Nowhere. First off, that name, perfect, because it captures something about being a reader. You don't have to leave your chair to go everywhere. You can travel the world, travel time, travel dimensions just by opening a book. Now, why did I get into Mike's channel? Two reasons: his comedy and his love of classics. Let's start with the comedy. He does short, funny videos poking fun at readers, our quirks, our habits, the way non-readers look at us like we're from another planet. If you've ever laughed at yourself for staying up too late to finish your book or trying to explain a convoluted 5-book series to your friend who isn't really a reader while he's watching TV, you'll get a kick out of his humor. But underneath the comedy, there's a serious passion for books that aren't brand new. He reads a lot of older stuff, classics, things that you can find in libraries, thrift shops, or even your grandma's bookshelf. That's important because BookTube can sometimes feel like it's chasing the hot new release every week. Mike reminds me that there's value in the books that have stood the test of time. Personally, I like to mix it up, some new, some old, and his channel nudges me to remember the older gems I might have skipped. If you don't chuckle at least once watching his channel, I'd argue you might not be a real reader. Next up, let's talk about Murphy Napier. I came across her channel when I was looking for more fantasy and sci-fi recommendations. I had just finished Harry Harrison's Stainless Steel Rat series, which by the way is fantastic if you like clever rogues and old school sci-fi, and I was looking for something in that same spirit. That's when Murphy recommended Scott Lynch's The Lies of Locke Lamora, and let me tell you, that series blew me away. The first book was amazing, the second book was strong, and the third was solid. It gave me exactly what I was looking for, a smart, roguish protagonist in a richly built fantasy world. That recommendation earned her a lot of trust in my book. Now when I'm looking to dip back into my comfort zone of fantasy or sci-fi, her channel is one of my first stops. What I appreciate about Murphy is that she mostly focuses on newer books, but every now and then she dips into older stuff. That balance works well for me. When I want something fresh and buzzy, I go to her. When I want to anchor myself, I pull from my own backlog. The last booktuber I rely on for reviews is the Sleepy Book Reader. Now, this guy is a little closer to my demographic. Looks to be around my age, maybe a little older, and he's into older books, especially pulp sci-fi and fantasy, and that's my jam. One of his big recommendations was Henry Treece's Vikings Dawn trilogy. He talked about how he discovered it when he was younger and just rediscovered it in a thrift store recently and was talking about the books, and I thought, you know what, let me try it, and I really enjoyed the first book. What I like about his style is that it's laid back. He's not constantly doing flashy hauls, reorganizing shelves, or showing off special editions with sprayed edges. Nothing wrong with that. It adds color to the community, but his approach is more like, hey, I read this, it was good, let's talk about it. And sometimes that's exactly what I want. For me, watching his channel feels like having a quiet chat with a fellow reader who just happens to be into the same kind of dusty old paperbacks I love. Now let's switch gears and talk about the booktubers and related creators who focus on book tech, which, as you know, is my other big passion. First up is Manit Paul. What I love about his channel is that he reviews e-readers not just as a techie, but as a reader. He's not obsessed with specs for the sake of specs. Instead, he asks, how does this feel in the hand? How does this screen look after a couple hours of reading? Does the software get in your way, or does it disappear so you can just enjoy the book? That's big for me, because when I look at an e-reader, I don't care about the processor or the resolution. I care about the reading experience, and I feel he nails that. Even though he reviews color e-readers, he always admits he prefers black and white for reading books, and honestly I kind of agree. There's something crisp and focused about e-ink that right now is superior to color. Next is Good E-Reader. If you've ever Googled anything about e-readers, you probably stumbled upon them. They're not just a channel, they're practically an ecosystem. They've got a YouTube channel, a blog, and even an online store. What I like is that they cover everything. New device launches, industry news, software updates, even niche e-ink gadgets you wouldn't expect. If it's e-ink, they're probably talking about it. If you're into digital reading at all, this channel is a must. And then we have Fit Danielle Reads. I don't think she even meant to become a tech reviewer. Her channel name makes it sound like a lifestyle and health channel, but as time went on, her book tech videos blew up and she leaned into it. Her style is super approachable. She's not a hardcore techie, and that's actually what makes her so good. When she reviews or does a tutorial, she explains it in plain language the way she figured it out herself. Watching her feels like watching a friend walk you through something step by step. Lastly, I want to shout out a channel that's not exactly booktube, but definitely book related, Matt with 4 T's. This channel does deep dives into comic book history, the writers, the artists, the trends, the cultural impact. And while I consider myself more of a casual comic book reader, I find his videos fascinating. For example, he'll unpack how a particular artist influenced generations of creators, or how a storyline reflected what was going on in the world at the time. It gives you a whole new appreciation for comics as an art form and as a cultural mirror. If you ever liked comics, even casually, you'll get a lot out of his content. So those are my favorite booktubers and book-related creators. Khalila D showed me the joy of variety. Mike Travels Nowhere reminded me not to forget the classics. Murphy Napier gave me a solid fantasy and sci-fi recommendations. The Sleepy Book Reader connected me to my older pulp favorites. And Manapete, Goody Reader, and Fit Danielle keep me up to speed on book tech. And Matt with 4Ts feeds my inner comic book history nerd. These creators inspire me and remind me why I love being part of the reading community. So if you're looking for new channels to follow, check them out. I've included links in the description. And let me know in the comments who your favorite booktubers are. This is Ofori, the Digital Reader. Keep reading.